Great. Yeah, thanks so much for having us again. I think the last time we were here was last summer. Um, and that was, I think, Rebecca and I. And so my name is Adrienne Bachheim. I'm a planner with the city of Minneapolis with community planning and economic development. And now we've got Linnea with us. Rebecca has left the city employment for other opportunities, and Linnea is now our lead. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Linnea.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Linnea Graffender-Bartels. I am a senior project coordinator in CPED at the city of Minneapolis. Most of my work is in residential finance, so affordable housing development, multifamily projects. And I've been on the new Nicollet project for a little over a year now. And yeah, when Rebecca switched positions, I took over as the project lead. So it's really nice to meet you all, and thanks for coming tonight.
And last time when we were here, we gave kind of an overview of the work to date, and we especially summarized what happened in the work that we did last year about the public space and the street layout. And and then we kind of talked about what was coming up with this next phase of work. So now we're here to give you an overview of what we've been doing the last few months, the engagement that we did last summer and fall, and we'll talk through this development framework document that is out, out for review, and we'll kind of go through some important elements of that, and then we can talk about what happens after that document is hopefully approved by council and the mayor. But first, in case you haven't been involved so much in the project, I'll just give you a quick overview about that. If you want to go to the next slide. This is over at Nicollet and Lake. The city owns this property now between the Midtown Greenway and Lake Street and Blaisdell and First. It's about 10 acres, and the general plans are to reconnect the street, Nicollet Avenue, through the site, and then redevelop the rest of the site as mixed-use development, walkable area. And let's see, we can go to the next slide. If you look at kind of the overarching timeline for the project, we've been at this for 3 years, doing engagement starting in 2022. We asked big questions about what are some overall goals for the site, just wanting to understand the community's desired outcomes. And then phase 2 is when we did the concept layout plan for new Nicollet Avenue and public space framework, which looked at, where would public space be happening on the site? What does that look like? And now we've been doing this phase 3 starting last summer, and we're just about to wrap up. And then we'll talk a little bit later about what happens beyond that. I think we can go to the next slide. Hang on one second. I've got. Yes. So this phase 3 work is pretty much deciding what are the big goals for the site with these developable areas. We've got the future public park being planned for this northeast quadrant. We have a mid-block walking and biking connection through that western half of the site. And so this work now is trying to understand, what are the market forces happening right now? How does that affect what can happen here with the buildings? What does ownership look like on the site? That sort of thing. So let's talk about next slide, the engagement work that we did this last summer and fall that you may have been involved in. We did, we've been doing this engagement for a long time now, and we continue to engage a lot of the same groups that we've been meeting with this whole time, including you all. And we had, again, 14 different engagement events, 2,700 public interactions, just a lot of continued extensive engagement as we've been doing all along. In the next slide, you'll see kind of what we engaged folks on this last summer and fall. This is where we, doing this market study, better understanding what we think the market could provide on the site, what developers could provide on the site, thinking about our last couple different phases of engagement and what is important to the community, and then also what the city wants to accomplish in terms of overall goals for the city. Looking at all that, we came up with what we called a possible development scenario. And this is what we think that the market could provide on its own. And we showed this to folks and said, this is probably what could happen, but if we want to have anything above and beyond that, what we're calling reach elements, tell us what you think would be most important to you in terms of development. So reach elements would be requiring additional government tools or funding or incentives to be successful. So we did a survey, we did a lot of these in-person events and asked folks, of these 8, I believe, reach elements, what are the most important things to you? And what we found was, folks wanted even more green space than we had talked about in phase 2. Housing diversity was important, lots of different kinds of housing. A grocery store was the most important. Sustainability when it comes to these buildings is important. And then having more, providing storefronts, smaller storefronts maybe for smaller businesses is another top priority. So we also, in this diagram, you'll see that, we looked at what is it that we're hearing from the 4 focus area neighborhoods. And that is Whittier Alliance, Lyndale, Phillips West, and Central. And then how does that compare to what we're hearing overall from folks? And we found that they're pretty comparable when it comes to what is most important in development for the site. With that, I will pass over to Linnea to talk more about what's in this development framework.
Yes. So thank you, Adrienne. So one of the things that's in our development framework is, has used the community engagement results from this phase and also previous phases to establish what we call development guidelines that describe how we're going to approach the development process and that reflect some of the themes and values we heard throughout this process. These guidelines are also grounded in established city policy and market realities. And we're going to use these guidelines as a tool for ensuring that implementation of the plan achieves the community's desired outcomes. I will not read them to you, but feel free to ask questions as well. I just mentioned market realities because this phase of the project was also informed by a market study completed by our consultant. And that study examined the site's potential for housing, retail, and office space. And some of the key takeaways from that analysis are that we feel very confident about the demand for housing here. And so most of the development is planned for housing. We think there's some demand for new retail space, especially a grocery store. We don't expect to see a lot of demand for office space. And we do anticipate that completion of the new park will boost demand for the site overall. And as a final key takeaway, we expect development of the site is going to take quite a long time over multiple market cycles before it's entirely built out. And here is a concept image, an illustrative view of what the site could look like based on the uses that we've prescribed in the development framework. So you can see there are mixed-use buildings, in particular with retail lining Lake Street. And that is exciting. It's going to close that long-time gap in the urban fabric here that was created by the Kmart parking lot in particular. The heights of these buildings are in the 4 to 6 stories range. The zoning at the site would actually allow for taller buildings than that. And so we've modeled shorter buildings just because current market realities make taller buildings here not really financially feasible right now. We could see that change in the future and see taller buildings proposed here, and that would be fine. We've just stuck with what we know for right now. Um, and then the other thing to note here is the future park up in the northeast corner of the site. So here, oh, I went too far. Here's another two different ways of looking at the development framework. I'll focus first on the left-hand side here, the orange buildings, and kind of walk you through the different uses that we're planning for across the site. So first, I'll note that we're looking at 6 parcels here. And overall across the site, we are expecting to include new market rate and affordable rental housing, some ownership housing, some retail space, including a grocery store and some smaller spaces scattered throughout, and then including some retail space, or excuse me, community serving space for a nonprofit, as well as the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. As far as the land use characteristics that we lay out in the development framework, we've got building 1 down here in the southeast corner is expected to be a mixed-use building with some first floor retail along Lake Street and affordable apartments above. And on building 2, just north of that, adjacent to the park, is another mixed-use building. First floor is going to be some space for the park board to have like a retail scale community center or like a rec space that would serve the park and interface with the park there. And then also space on that first floor for some sort of community serving nonprofit. The user is not identified or prescribed. We're gonna look for response from the development community about who's interested in locating here. And so we're leaving that open. And then above those first floor uses, more affordable apartments. So this building 1 and 2 here, parcel 1 and 2, is going to be where we focus our first development efforts. This will be our phase 1 of development at the site. We're going to break the site up into 6 phases, and that's going to follow the numbering you see here on the parcels. So phase 1 will be the southeast corner, and working on developing those buildings as closely as we can with also the development of the park. So hoping to deliver the east block of the site at roughly the same time or within a couple years of each other to really build a cohesive sense of place here and to build momentum for the rest of the project on the west side. And I'll walk you through that. Parcel 3 down in the southwest corner of the site is another mixed-use building, and this is where we expect to see a grocery store locate on the first floor at the intersection here of Lake and Nicollet. There's also, we also are calling for a little bit more of retail space at the intersection of Lake and Blaisdell. And then above that, first floor retail apartments and a market rate component as well as an affordable component. Moving north, parcel 4. This parcel is centered around the mid-block promenade that Adrian mentioned. So that's the bike and pedestrian throughway that will connect people from the park across Nicollet Avenue and through the site to Blaisdell. And on either side of that, we're planning for townhomes, and these are planned to be affordable ownership townhomes. One of the things we heard throughout community engagement that was really important was to include opportunities for ownership and wealth building. And so we're excited to include these townhomes to try and meet that desire. And the townhomes will also be a nice way to activate the promenade space and make it a comfortable and exciting place to be. North of the townhomes, we've got parcel 5 is just a residential apartment building. And across the way there is building 6. Oh, excuse me, I should say that the building 5 or parcel 5, just an apartment building, is expected to be affordable apartments. And then lastly, parcel 6, across from the public park, a mixed use building, some first floor retail, and above it, market rate apartments. So overall, based on our best, understanding of market conditions and what the site can hold, we expect that we'll see 500 to 600 rental housing units here. That's a mix of market rate and subsidized affordable. We'll see some retail space, the 10,000 to 15,000 square feet of indoor community uses. That's the park board space as well as the nonprofit space. The grocery store is expected to be in the 20,000 to 30,000 square foot range. And then the townhomes, we think 20 to 25 townhomes could fit in that area. And then throughout those private development spaces, we're going to be looking for additional opportunities for interconnected green space, gathering space. You can see some of that conceptually here with, I hope you can see my arrow. I'm not sure. Can you see my arrow? Yes. Okay, great. All right. So of course we've got the public park and folks can walk along the promenade. We'd also like to see a pedestrian way along the north end or the north side, and then folks could walk through. This is not exactly what will be built, but this is the concept of like finding ways for people to be able to move through and enjoy the site and have more green spaces to enjoy. Are any questions about this slide?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Starting with, from the looks of things, you've got the taller buildings on the south side of the lot, and which means everything is going to be in the shadow of those taller buildings, including, for instance, the townhomes, which will be in shadows almost all the time. Maybe in the sunrise and sunset, they might get some sun, but otherwise they're going to be pretty dark. Is there some reason for that, or are you thinking of maybe putting the taller buildings on the north side?
And
Generally, go ahead, Linnea.
you can go, Adrian. That's fine.
We do have some rules about shadowing onto the greenway in our zoning. So we wouldn't want to put very tall buildings next to the greenway for that exact same reason. I think the reason or the way that those buildings are along Lake Street on the south side of the site, the way they're oriented would allow more sun to peek through there, certainly during the more summer months. And that is certainly something that we would be working with developers in the future as they're putting together their development plans to make sure that buildings aren't always in shadow.
And I'll just reiterate too that the building heights that you see here are not prescriptive. This is a concept, so we don't.
Okay.
The actual heights of buildings will get worked out in the development process.
So I guess sun access is, and just a thought of mine, and then parking, is there any idea for parking that's going to take place? Or
Yep.
is there an
Yeah.
assumption that people won't have vehicles?
There is an expectation that parking will be done like internal to the site and structured parking. So there will not be surface parking lots. There's there's a little bit of on-street parking, not many, just a handful of spaces that are going to be on the new stretch of Nicollet Avenue. And then each parcel will need to deal with parking internal to the site.
Or
You know, the
underground.
other thing you mentioned too is that bikeway that kind of in the middle of the property going north and south hops onto Blaisdell, which essentially heads south at that point, and the bike lanes are across from that. So you'd have to do something on Blaisdell to make that easy to cross that traffic and get over to the bike lane.
Mhm.
Yep. So, yeah, good catch. That would happen at the intersection of Lake and Blaisdell, and then it's a little
Okay.
hard to see on this graphic, but the bikeway there would also be space for a bikeway on that east side of Blaisdell to go up to that mid-block crossing.
Once again, then that would be taking out parking options on
Nope.
Blaisdell.
I don't believe there is parking on
Aren't any parking
Blaisdell.
along there.
Mm-mm.
I
it might,
mean, there isn't now because of everything else that's going on. There is on Blaisdell north of 28th.
Right.
yeah,
So I don't see
but this section from the Greenway to Lake Street, there's no parking on
No,
there
I know,
now.
but that's because there hasn't anyway. But that's not. I'm just saying
I
there
don't see
is
any
on
space.
Blaisdell north of that.
Yeah, I don't see any space for parking in the future along that, I guess, driving along there.
Well, that's my point. And then and on First, there's nothing either.
Right.
So on street, as you said earlier, is just Nicollet.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
So
Um,
in the report, I think it's farther along, you state that parking for buildings 1 and 2 would be itemized at 85 spaces each. And so you're saying that the developer will they be required to put those in? Will that be for retail? Will that be for tenants? Do you have a picture of how and where that's going to happen?
So you're referencing the table that's in the report, and that is based on this concept plan. So again, like not a prescription, but what's likely. So 85 spaces would be not necessarily a requirement, but what we expect would be provided by the developer to meet the needs of the building that they are building.
I guess as John highlighted, the lack of street parking around there, and yet the discussion of public space, both for community and for retail, means that someone's going to drive from somewhere to that and need someplace to put their vehicle. And so private parking under buildings, it leads to some logistics for parking.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that.
because there's nothing on Lake Street either. So
Right.
it's at that point, I'm just, trying to think of where people are gonna park. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do, I know I've spoken with you about this repeatedly, but parking has been strongly requested by people living in that area as a real need for this site. And so I think if the city's gonna leave it up to the developer, I don't see a way that it's really gonna serve the retail needs, and so those retail needs are gonna struggle. It's gonna be set off for tenants. And so I think as much as the city doesn't want to pay for parking, there is the opportunity while the site is empty to look at putting in underground parking before the lots are sold and selling it at a higher price once that's installed.
I'm also trying to figure out how this would work with a grocery store.
Correct.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I just can't. I mean, the places I know, like, the Lunds Byerly's that's up on Central, they've got a massive parking complex there that work, and that's why that works.
The grocery
And
store will definitely need parking and it will need
yeah,
to be internal to the site. Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, the Aldi on Lindale somehow makes it work, but I haven't pulled into their parking lot.
it's really hard to, yeah, that's someone who uses that street a lot, Glendale a lot. It's awkward. I mean, it's not quite the wedge, but it's awkward. But it's awkward. Yeah.
And so that comes to some of my questions about accessing grocery store with deliveries and trucks.
Yeah.
I know that there was a fight 20 years ago on Nicollet by the businesses that demanded that they have a 50-foot road for the turning of trucks to be able to deliver to restaurants and the hardware store and stuff. And so Blaisdell right now is so skinny. I'd be interested in how traffic thinks they're going to get delivery trucks into that site. And garbage removal coming off of Blaisdell.
Yeah, those are definitely things that we've been talking about with Public Works, making sure, and the consultants, looking at different scenarios, turning radii for different vehicles that would be delivering to a grocery store or other retail along Lake Street, making sure that there is a wide enough space for those. And so we're confident that we can make sure that the access that they do receive will be adequate for what they need. And a lot of that will be figured out once we have a grocery store that's interested in this site.
Yeah. And then the other point on this map, has it been decided by the city that that promenade will not be angled? Because in all
Correct.
these drawings, it's straight. And I feel like a lot of the public voted on this plan because of that angled street. That's the chatter I heard, is it made it feel different than the other more traditional grid-like patterns.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you're losing that edge, and now we're just in 4 big boxes again.
Yeah, that's a good point that we do address in the report, but we haven't included in here. And yeah, that is something that, when we were putting together those phase 2 plans that had the 2 different options for the promenade, we left it as 2 different options because we knew that it might be really challenging for developers to have that diagonal promenade. And I know that was something that was very popular with folks. But as we're going through this phase 3 working with the consultants and Public Works and doing some of this scenario for the different kinds of development in this area, given all these other challenges that a lot of you have brought up in terms of access, parking, so many different things happening in this area, the diagonal promenade was an additional constraint that we thought would just be too difficult to include, especially if we want this grocery store along Lake Street. So in this plan, yes, we are saying that the promenade would be straight rather than diagonal because of those reasons. Sarah, you were at the open house, right? Did you hear anyone mention that as a concern, not having that diagonal?
Well,
Or
I
have you
was
heard
at
that
the
from other folks?
beginning of the process as people came in. So I was not hearing any reactions. I hadn't seen the development plan yet.
Okay.
So no, because I
Okay.
was talking more about how we got to the point of you all having the
Right.
development plan.
That's right. That's right.
I
Yeah.
do. I have a couple questions if So you're seeing 1 and 2 being affordable housing developers? One or
Correct.
two developers or one or
Yep.
two buildings? Is that true? I think I overheard that.
Yes.
And are you seeing them being responsible for building out the retail space and the very large nonprofit community space? Are you seeing them having to come to the table with a community partner to be selected as a developer? How are you seeing this play out in this first RFP?
Yes, we will want to see a response, especially for parcel or building 2, if it's its own building. And it probably most likely is going to be its own building, that proposal would have a proposed user for the space. Yeah, so like partnering with an organization that wants to be there.
And so what that organization does and who they are will be part of the selection process for the developer chosen. Is
Yeah.
that true?
Yep.
And will it be the city deciding that, the community deciding that, the city council deciding that? Who picks the developer?
Sure. Should I jump to my next steps side? Because I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Um, and then I can come back to if you have other questions, Sarah, about the development program.
I think my other question you're probably also going to address, because I'm thinking of the timeline of building affordable housing.
Mhm.
And so I guess I'm thinking of the rollout of when each of these parcels is going to go
Sure. Yeah.
on the market and the length of the RFP for people to put their partners together in that whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, Adrian, I forgot you have these slides too. Well, I'll jump to the next steps.
No, you can go through it. I'll bring it back up if we don't talk about it.
I do want to also note there's a question in the chat about the timing of opening the street, but we can come back to that too.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, so next steps for the process, we are finalizing the framework report this month, and we've had the open house. We were talking to the different neighborhood groups. We've gotten some email comments, and we're taking all that into consideration to finalize the document. And then it gets presented to the city council, likely at the April 22nd business housing zoning or BHZ committee meeting. And we're going to ask for council approval of the document at that point. And once the document is approved, we'll move forward into the implementation phase. And so overall, that's going to look like multiple rounds of requests for proposals over time. And the first RFP, request for proposals, we are shooting for the second half of 2025 to release that. And so prior to releasing that RFP and each RFP, we will engage the neighborhood groups on the development objectives that we're going to include in the RFP. So like what we're asking for from developers to get feedback on that. And for this first RFP, it should look very similar to what's in the framework, with maybe some more specifics and more details about what we're asking for. But and future RFPs should also look like this, what's laid out in the development framework for that parcel. But they may also need to adjust to whatever current market conditions or new realities are going on at that time. But this document will continue to be like the guiding framework for those RFPs. So once we get development proposals in response to the RFP, we will engage the neighborhood groups again on those development proposals. And exactly how that looks will kind of depend on how many responses we get. But yes, we will come back and get feedback from the neighborhood groups on what you think of the development proposals. Um, that will be so community feedback, and then when the developer is selected, to your question, Sarah, that is something like the city council has to approve the granting of exclusive development rights for that parcel to that developer. And then the development teams will, work on their project, getting their funding together, getting their plans drawn, getting their land use approvals. And in that process is when development teams, the developer will engage the neighborhood group on their development plan moving forward. So we've got several steps for each RFP or each development parcel and multiple iterations of that process where we'll be continuing to engage the folks who have expressed so much interest and ideas about the site. So does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
and how long are RFPs active? Like you post an RFP for, is there a rule? 90 days, 180 days?
There's
Can you
not a
post it
rule.
longer?
Yeah, we can post them longer. Sometimes we post them and we don't get enough response, or we want more response, or just wasn't a good enough response and we extend it. So, um,
And is there a way, i- is there a way to do matchmaking? And I'm thinking an affordable housing developer applies, but they don't really have an idea of what might work in the space as a nonprofit partner. Is there a separate way that nonprofit partners could apply? Schools, technical colleges, work, people we haven't thought of yet who might be a good fit for such a big space who, and then the city could match potential organizations with developers. Has that ever been done?
I don't know if that's ever been done, but we kind of it doesn't mean it can't be done here. I think that's an interesting idea. Uh, we
I
don't
mean,
get a lot of opportunities like this to have 10 acres where we're developing open land. So, um,
well, and I'm looking at, I think you stayed in here that it's like, could be 10 to 12,000 square feet, like a lot of space. And
yeah,
so if we're really interested in wealth building opportunities for people in the immediate area, um, they might not be developers themselves.
right. Oh yeah. No, I don't expect that they would be.
So that puts the schedule approximately on a building opening in 2030. Correct?
Oh, a building opening? Yes. So typical period from proposal to construction starting for an affordable project is 3 to 5 years. And then you have an 18-month construction cycle. So yeah,
Yeah.
early 2030.
And are you looking at, you said you wanted that in the park to sort of, I don't know, activate the site? Are you looking at not releasing another RFP until those are done?
Perhaps. I think that is not yet determined and will get figured out as we move into that first phase. If there's a lot of interest in parcel 3, which is the grocery store mixed use building, if we're hearing a lot of interest, like I don't think that there's a good reason to wait. But right now, we think that the success of phase 1 is going to build the market for the third building with the grocery store. And that's just based on our best understanding of market conditions right now. But it could go faster.
So what's the plan for the western site through this whole process? is a plan to leave it fenced
Yes.
and boarded?
Fenced. Yeah.
And has any crazy talk happened about how that site could be used as advertising potential for the entire development? Such as
I don't know
signage on
about
the
what you mean.
fences or building temporary structures that could be used as job recruitment centers for construction companies or for nonprofits or,
It'd be nice to see it looking like more than a fenced-in piece of property
Right.
with some
Yeah.
practical connection with the proposed projects. Sarah's
Yeah.
got a great idea there.
We have heard a lot of interest in, what's going to happen with the site in the interim. And I think at least for the next few years, it's going to be important that that space is available for staging for the road project. You've seen that the site has been used as a staging area. I think it will continue to be needed for that. And it may be needed for staging for first phase development as well. So we certainly don't want to limit that room, that flexibility that we have to not disrupt the rest of the public realm with construction. And then as far as other interim uses of the site, we want to keep it fenced so that it's secure, and managing interim uses of the site are kind of beyond our scope right now. We've
I have a
Yep.
funding question regarding like for phase one and those building one and two there, that phase one
Yeah.
is subsidized, and has money already been allocated by the city for the subsidy for that phase one and two, or phase one at least? So that when the RFPs go out, you know what kind of subsidy is going to be allocated to the property?
We don't allocate funds before we know what the project is, but we are anticipating that this project or these projects will use our Affordable Housing Trust Fund program, which gets an annual allocation of around like $18 million. And so fully anticipating that these projects will use that resource, and that will be.
Yeah, there's kind of a question in the back of my head in terms of how competitive the demand for that is, because there's already the PPL initiative, the phase one that's being developed on 31st and Nicollet. And then there's a corresponding phase two that they're going to want to build, which will require a subsidy. And then 33rd and Nicollet, there's that proposed senior housing building that will require a subsidy, and 34th and Nicollet, a corresponding senior housing subsidized building. So the demand, and then it sounds like it's going to overlap for all of those. And I could be off. We haven't heard anything from 33rd or 34th and Nicollet recently, but I'm assuming those two projects are still going forward looking for funding.
You were talking about demand for funding or like competition for
Yeah.
funding. Yeah.
Competition for affordable housing funding. Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Specifically for the subsidy.
I would
subsidy
assume,
money.
Ed, those will both come in this year.
Yeah.
So I
Oh.
don't know if there's a cap on areas. I actually don't know.
There's not. No, there's
Okay.
not.
I would assume
Yeah.
both those are gonna try for funding this year.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about us cannibalizing or taking away from
No,
other things
No.
okay.
No.
Good. That's really good to know.
Yeah.
Do you I mean, I understand this is all predicting down the road quite a bit, but are there any concerns that anybody has that the trust fund will not be sufficient to fund all of this that needs to be done?
Well, the trust fund certainly won't be the only resource that funds these projects. It is a significant resource. So typically our affordable projects are financed either with 9% low-income housing tax credits or with housing revenue bonds and 4% housing tax credits. And I will try not to like nerd out on you too hard about that, but that's that's what the most of my job is working on those projects and the financing structures. So those tax credits provide a lot of equity, and then deferred loans like the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund provides kind of fill the gap that's left over. So, and sometimes there are first mortgages involved with these construction projects as well, depending on how they cash flow. So, the trust fund is one resource.
Yeah, and I'm actually more asking. I just used the trust fund because that was the thing you brought up. I'm just more asking
Sure.
in general sort of the confidence level that there will be sufficient funding to be able to cover the sub. We're looking at an awful, which is great. We're looking at an awful lot of subsidized housing in this project. Are we, again, given the projects I just recited just in our own neighborhood,
Yeah.
and obviously a lot of these are going in other neighborhoods as well, and you have a much better, clearer understanding of this, and I'm obviously asking the right person.
Yeah.
What is it? What is your confidence level that this is going to be doable? I guess.
I'm very confident that it's doable.
There you go. Thank you.
Yep, we do. We do lots of affordable housing every year. We're fortunate that our city budget prioritizes affordable housing development. That we have, we have a lot of funding available to support projects every year. So I feel good about it.
Thank you.
Can I ask one related housing question? In the report, you talk about incorporating all levels of affordable housing, 30, 50, 60% AMI, and also supportive housing.
Mhm.
How are you picturing supportive housing fitting in the site? Are you seeing a building that's supportive housing? Are you seeing supportive housing spread somehow throughout here? Like, what does that mean to you when you put it in a report?
Yeah, it could be either, and we haven't made a decision about that. So sometimes, or often, we see affordable housing projects that include a certain subset of their units that are supportive housing units. So that there are services provided to maybe like 10 units in the building. And then we also see projects that are 100% all of the units are supportive housing. And so it could be either here, and we haven't settled on that exactly. Projects that when it comes to the available funding mechanisms that we have, so like state, county, and city funds that go towards affordable housing, there is additional award and additional priority given to projects that include some of those supportive housing units. So it could be, even if we weren't interested in it, in pursuing it, it could be a natural outcome in an affordable housing. So.
I wondered if we wanted to address the question in the chat about the timing of the street. Actually, I think there is already maybe some underground work happening on the site in preparation for that, but if not currently, certainly soon this spring, you'll see utility work starting under the street. And then we still don't know the exact timing of the opening of the street, but it sounds as if it'll probably take 2 construction years to work on the street itself, but we haven't heard exactly what that timing is yet.
I think the last we heard, Adrian, was late 2026.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thanks. These are really great questions that you all are bringing up. We really appreciate the close look you're taking at this.
Yeah.
Do you know what the park board design timeline is for the interior and exterior space? Because I know they have no money allocated yet.
Right. We don't know yet. We have regular meetings with them to figure out the funding, timing with this first phase of development. So there's still quite a lot to be figured out, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
By the way, would the park board own that park? Or would the city own it?
It is their intention to own it.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
I just saw a problem with Lindale School and ownership of this by the school of what the park board is maintaining, and it was a problematic situation.
Mm.
Dual ownership doesn't work.
Mhm.
So there is mention in the report too about other green spaces and other, I can't remember the word. Partnerships for the mixed public spaces. Are those partnerships that the park board will be pursuing for the other green spaces, or partnerships that the city will be pursuing?
I think maybe you're referring to these like publicly accessible but privately owned spaces that we heard a lot of interest in. Yes, the park board I don't think would be involved. It would be private developers owning that property, and then there could be a variety of different ways that those spaces are maintained and operated. So that's something that will be figured out during those RFP processes.
Yeah.
Any other questions for us?
Did you have 20 more pages you want to run through of your presentation? I think there's a lot more.
Yeah, we should mention that on the web page for actually maybe you could go to the last slide, Linnea. There's information about how to get to the project web page, and you can find the draft report on there, and you can take a look at that. It's more than 100 pages. There's a lot of information in there. We went over the big important parts of it today, but you can also send us an email if you have additional comments or questions. And yeah, that's.
And so we will be sharing this with our committee and whatever on our YouTube station. So people with questions or comments should do the new Nicollet redevelopment email.
Yep.
And when should they ideally have those in by, if they want them considered in the final rendition of this plan?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean,
as soon as possible.
Yes. Yes, we're working on the final document now. So yeah.
Our intention was to meet with you guys a week ago, and we got a snowstorm. So
yeah.
I know, and now the snow's all gone.
Yeah, right.
Okay, guess any last questions?
It's very thorough. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all your thoughtful comments.
Okay. Great.
Right.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yep. Thank you.
Welcome. Have a good rest of your night.
Thanks.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.